They don't really care about having another park.
That's their problem. We shouldn't be rescuing.
The one developer I
Well,
wouldn't mind
it's-
rescuing for a bad decision would be the
it's-
landfill. If we could use
It's
open space funds to buy that.
allowable what they're doing.
Yeah, listen to what he has to tell us about a park in Phillipsburg. Oh, yeah, in Phillipsburg, the dump there, it's.
No, it was a dump, it became a public park.
Public park.
And then they had to close it because it was
Bubbling up.
bubbling up and trash was coming up, and now they have to
Yeah.
spend millions.
EPA super
It was on the news this morning.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
Because I'm from Peter, and I know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's all over the township.
Yeah, I didn't see a whole lot in the article that went with whoever sent some initial link on that. It's like, oh, there wasn't really much said. It's like, so.
This thing across
Yeah, the
the street is
news
like
was a little.
they try to contain.
Yeah, they tried to contain, now they have to pull it all up and then reline it.
Eeks.
Built what they wanted to build.
Oh,
Federal funds.
Nice.
it's gonna be a, ground slope.
And it never needs that. They still own it. Not the same way with this. Qualifies for this. We'll buy it for that. We can do that. Yeah, but I couldn't.
Carol, what do we know by way of response? Are there others we expect to attend tonight, do you recall?
So,
Yes, I
Okay.
have everybody except Janine just withdrew, and Winfield was supposed to come, and he had an issue too, so,
Okay.
but everybody else.
Okay, I did notice Kathy said she would be here.
Kathy,
Yeah,
Chad,
notes for that.
Cheyenne, yeah, they're all due to be here.
Yeah, I wonder, did you see the pictures of the plume that was coming out of the park and stuff?
Drew probably sees it all the time.
Were they visible?
Nope, just a
The flare, the big the jumbo flare.
Boy, any of you see the pictures? Any of you see the pictures of that Boeing SpaceX coming back?
And you did
My
want
friend
to
goes south
you
into
did.
Bucks County and shared pictures that were breathtaking.
Oh, yeah?
You can see the vessel, the point of it, and then.
Good, all right, your name's on it, see?
Okay, just trying to be nice.
I was doing this just in case.
When I called in, I asked.
You did, I got the message,
If I
I
could
got
find
it.
it, it's breathtaking.
Did it just
Because
like,
he has a horse farm,
Because I have a note
so
right
he
next to
has
it.
a lot of trees behind his place.
Had one at one
The,
without
the
the minutes, or
silhouette
one
of
at
the
one without
trees
minutes,
and
and then
that
one
was
with
just
minutes.
breathtaking.
huh?
I'm sure you have that.
South of here, I guess, I mean, he was,
Well, Chad, no, I don't know what happened, I did get the message,
I think it's one of those things, Alan, you can see it from a great distance. Many years ago, like 1977, 1978, I was in Northern Ontario,
Well, I must have
and saw
known, I
this
mean, I
orange
had
streak
the
through
minutes,
the
like I said, the other two
atmosphere.
didn't want the minutes.
But at first I thought it was a meteorite, and I said, wait, meteorites don't move that slow. And then, just, I was astonished at this, and then the news the next day. It was
Chad
a
Heimbeck
Russian,
or Heimbecker?
satellite.
What?
You didn't see the council meeting.
Oh, did they get it wrong?
Well, it said Heimbeck in the memo, and I,
You fix it? No?
had my head chewed off about it.
But this thing
Because
that,
it was spelled
I don't
wrong?
know if I'm gonna be able to draw.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey, Russell.
sorry.
Well, who are you moving up to? You don't even know his name.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't know. It was like
Well,
a
I'm not even
2-hour
really a
argument.
Heimbecker. I was born in Allison anyways, so you know what? You can just get over that whole thing. I don't care. And
Like,
my biological
it's like,
father
I
was
don't know, I was so tired, it's like, I'm not even sure what it is,
My
but
biological
it's
father
like,
was adopted
it's
as
a
well,
typo.
and he was a Ziegenfuss, apparently. So Chad Ziegenfuss is what I should
my,
be if
that's
you go
different.
back, like,
Submitted into the environment.
How does that
1
happen?
million cubic feet.
You change all,
my dad was adopted, and then my stepfather adopted me and I took his last name.
okay.
And they're.
He's not my stepfather anymore, so I've always thought about changing it back. You know what I mean? You know?
So you could have like 6
No,
different
no.
names.
We can have another conversation about that person. He actually lives in the township.
It's orange. It looks like paper.
But yeah, no, not a very good person
The
at
thing
the
is,
end
if
of
they
the
don't
day.
purify that.
Neither of
gas
them were
heavily,
good fathers.
It's not just methane.
That's my job.
You'll have
That's my
that.
job to
You'll
be a
have
good
that.
dad.
That's right.
I just didn't anticipate being single father, widowed father. I mean, I didn't think I was going to be on my own doing this. I thought Destiny was going to be around. She was a kick-ass woman and wanted to be a mom so bad, and I probably dragged my feet longer than I should have on making a decision, and then she got sick, and here we are. But
You just see the state farm glow, looks like the mountains on top.
yeah,
Your kids are so giant
They're doing
already.
it.
It's
Huh?
like every time I see pictures, it's like they're giant.
Yeah, I mean,
I know. I'm trying to work on my daughter's weight. Yes, thank you.
No, I mean they're giant. They're big. They're like adult people.
Trying to keep her active. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
College or whatever.
No, but yeah, I
I
know.
know.
What you mean. I
That's
know
what I
what you
mean.
mean.
They're like
They,
adult people.
No, she's in 8th grade now, so she only has like 4 years. And I don't
Yeah,
know.
really.
She's about ready to start getting a job. I would think she could start picking up part-time something in the area. I don't know what.
That's hard when they don't drive. You gotta drive. Yeah.
Well, it's a pain for me to have to drive them everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. What'd you do when Kelly was growing up? I mean, like, were you at the barn?
She didn't have any job though. No, I
No?
wasn't.
just to make sure
Yeah, and she didn't want to get her license either. She didn't get her license till she was like 21, I think.
Oh, really?
She didn't want to. She didn't want to get her license. I don't know why. That was like, I couldn't wait.
I couldn't wait. I was like, give me
I
that
was
freedom.
15
right?
and 11 months.
We're going to the DMV today.
That's right. The
Right,
1 month
parallel
before.
Well, we do have a quorum at the moment.
Yeah,
We
so
expect
we can-
others to attend. So let's start the meeting, call the meeting to order. So roll call. Drew Germanosky, I'm here. Vice Chairman Jennifer Helton.
Here.
Secretary Laura Ray.
Here.
Alan Johnson. Here. Cheyenne Reeman. Kathy McGovern. Those two are not here yet, perhaps. Chad Heimbecker.
Here.
Is here. Janine Bonham, not here. Russell Sutton. Here. Winfield Clark, not here. And of course, this is for a further conversation a little bit later, but we do have now 2 vacancies for associate members. Okay, well, that brings us to the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. There was no executive session, so let's just move into the agenda since we have enough voting members here to function. The first items were the 2 open space properties that were recently visited by the Open Space Subcommittee. Here are summaries for everybody. I apologize that the first one, there's some multiple aerial photo images. 2 of them at least are perfect duplicates, but I received different files at different points in time somehow. There's one more. And so they're going to go, the data is just presented sequentially such that property 2024 number 1 with the score sheet scored by myself, Jennifer, Russ, and Kathy. Let the record show that Kathy Pitchell-McGovern has arrived. And pass this down, please, to Kathy. Good. I'm better now.
Good.
You could figure out why. Okay, so I have them ordered sequentially with our scores, and what I did differently this time compared to what I did with the first property we scored and discussed at the last meeting is note at the bottom of the score sheet, there is a space for notes. So I typed out information that substantiates our scoring above, okay? One nice thing about this particular duplication of images is you can see better if you compare the first 2 aerial photos the one that shows sort of the property in light green, you can see the large tree canopy on the east side, but when you look at the other version of that, like a Google Earth image, you can see the large stand of oak trees and mature vegetation. So that sort of, that represents some of the trees that I just discussed in the notes to say that there's a large forested area with oak trees. The main features of the property, it does have development potential. The landscape is greatly developed. The linkage potential is to link with the rails to trail, which runs adjacent to it. It has ag soils. The main hydrologic features is along, I want to be careful I don't name the wrong road here, but along, I'll be careful again, I believe it's Reading Drive. There's a spring-fed perennial stream that's a cool water stream that they actually take water off of that channel and run it into a trout nursery. So they have, in essence, it's not technically a hatchery because they're not hatching fish there. So I think a fish nursery would be a better description. It's scenic, it's entirely underlain by carbonate geology, and fortuitously, Rush uses the rail to trail trail and has done so at times after heavy precipitation and has witnessed stormwater being stored on that property. So it has stormwater potential, stormwater retention potential. So overall, it scored a 19 out of 23. We unanimously agreed that we should recommend to the EAC that we forward this to council for assessment and then to add it to the open space program if everything follows suit. The individuals in charge of this property did express a strong interest in adding this to the open space program. It didn't strike us as they were just curious to see what might happen. They seemed very interested. So,
Beautiful property. Beautiful.
so I think if there aren't questions, we can move this to a vote. Does anyone have questions or thoughts to add? Okay, all in favor for us to move this forward to council for consideration into the open space program, say aye.
Aye.
So Carol, let the record show that it was unanimous support. I will give you copies of this and then I'll email you. I'm sorry? It was 24-1. I guess since there's no one here, we try to usually avoid names. It was the spring town sportsman.
Say it anyway.
Okay. So property 2024-1, I guess would be the best way to describe it. I'll forward e-copies of this to you tonight or tomorrow, and I'll give you copies.
We're on YouTube.
I'm sorry?
YouTube?
Oh, yes, thank you for that. I think I misspoke when I said the name of the property. We're not sure who owns that property. Thank you, Jennifer.
Where's the spring?
The spring, there's not a spring per se. The stream is a spring-fed stream.
Is this a stream that goes through it?
It goes through further over here, a little bit further to the east there. It's on the property,
Yep.
and there, Ellen has it there.
Right here.
I mean, Jennifer has it, Ellen.
So what happens to
This
the
So
structure?
that's along the road, isn't
Those
it?
those would stay.
The
So
rail
the
trail
rest
is
of it
right
would be
here.
the open space. There's
And
actually
this is the
two lines
creek.
there.
Okay, that property
Oh.
division, so those
Yeah, it
structures
runs-
would stay.
And
but
Reading
they
Road
still
goes
have
down along
access
the
to
other
that
side.
water
Yeah.
to
Makes
do
the,
the-
Reading
And
Road makes
yes,
that
oh,
bend.
yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so usually when open space, when property is preserved as open space, the portion that's in an envelope of use, it remains there. What they can't do is add new structures or change land use beyond that.
Okay, would there be any effort to connect this with some parking or trailhead access to the Saucon Rail Trail there?
We never brought that up
Yeah.
with them. I'm trying to think now as I pictured if it would be sensible.
There's that bridge. There's a bridge that goes over
Oh.
there.
But it's a foot.
Is that where we gathered to do the road cleanup?
I didn't even know about this place.
I'm having trouble
Is this on?
Tap it.
Okay.
No, it's not, it's by, oh, you're not allowed to say names.
Yeah.
It's in Bingham.
Okay. All right.
What names aren't we allowed to say?
Well, it doesn't
The
change.
name of the property, or the only thing I can think of is, but it's next to it.
Oh.
Okay, so then if you move forward in your packet there that I just distributed, the last 3 pages of that, last 3 sheets are for property 2024-03. This is kind of an interesting property because when I saw it came through, there was a moment of deja vu because I knew that we had scored this property once before. And in fact, what happened was it was scored in 2017. The EAC at that juncture recommended to council that the property be included in the open space program. But then talking to the stewards of the property, they indicated that what happened was before they can get an assessment completed and so forth, COVID-19 hit, and that just sort of derailed the whole process. So we went and scored it anew, and we really had to because, number one, our score sheet changed between 2017 and now. So, and we have a different EAC and a different open space subcommittee. So in essence, I believe that certainly invalidated that old assessment and record. And the property changed a little bit. So we did indeed rescore the property. It has development potential. We didn't give it a 5 out of 5 because it's a complex parcel with some of it along Black River and on the Black River floodplain, which wouldn't be developable, but the majority of the property is developable. And because of its location, scenic view, the fact that one piece of adjacent property sold for a remarkably high cost, we use that as an indicator that it has great development potential. And so we gave it a 4 out of 5 for that. There's no direct linkage. It's not an active farm. Does have ag soils. The hydrological features is Black River runs through two borders of the property. It sweeps around with the property line. It has sensitive natural features insofar as there's the floodplain of Black River, as well as the forested riparian corridor. And in addition, one of the things that happened between 2017 and now is they're no longer simply cutting the fields to maintain sort of a cut meadow, but rather they're letting it reforest and move back to forest. It's carbonate geology entirely, and scenic value. If you look at the property, you could easily imagine enjoying having a house on that property and looking out the windows or off the deck. It has stormwater mitigation potential insofar as it has the floodplain of Black River, where when it goes over bank, that water is being stored along that segment of floodplain, which reduces stormwater transfer further downstream. So altogether then, we scored this a 15 out of 23. It is in an area of the township that's otherwise reasonably developed, so it would be a bit of somewhat of an oasis to have it remain as open space. So the Open Space Committee agreed that we should recommend to the EAC that we should make a recommendation to council to put this in the open space program and proceed with further property value assessment, et cetera. So I open that up for questions, if people have questions.
Did you notice the 2 bridges?
Yeah, 2 bridges are there.
And the bridges are probably on the land where the easement would be.
Right.
So how does that affect the township?
I'm not sure how it affects the township. I mean, with easements, we don't become responsible. We don't buy those properties. So the property owners would still be responsible for maintenance. And it's an interesting property because if I can't mention the name here, but it is something North 3 there are multiple parcels involved in this whole thing, this whole area, and there are multiple access points to it. So it's kind of intriguing in the sense that the access road that we used connects to properties that at the moment are not allowed to use that access road, but they have another access road from the other side. So with development, there are two existing bridges, and there also is physically access from the other side. So it seems that it could easily be developed with sufficient access for emergency vehicles, et cetera. So it struck us as certainly developable. And also, I didn't mention on the last property, the zoning was, for the other property was an R40, this was an R80, rural and developable.
Well, those two bridges would never meet anybody's standards. It would never meet the township standards, would never meet the PA department standards.
No.
But it wouldn't, but that wouldn't prevent a developer
Yeah.
from putting a new bridge in to provide access.
These are private bridges.
So in
Well, the
other
bridges-
words, in and of themselves, they wouldn't negate further development of that landscape. It would
Well,
just require that a developer build a new bridge or two.
The bridges service those homes that are in that, right behind
Correct.
Yes.
the Black River
And
area.
again, the frontage would allow for new bridges to be constructed to provide access directly into this property.
And the sewer lines right there too,
Yeah.
right by the bridge.
So I had a question. I think when this came before us a long time ago, weren't they looking for a purchase?
Yeah.
And now it's definitely an easement, right?
The conversations we had suggested easement.
Okay. Because I
One
think
of-
that was one of the hangups
There was
before
another
too, was
complication.
purchase.
I'm sorry to cut you off, Laura Ray. But there was another complication insofar as this is sort of an association that owns this property.
Right.
And what has happened again in the passage from 2017 to now is the number of shareholders has contracted. So there's fewer people that, from what we were told, were very interested in setting up the easement. So I would think at this juncture, what would happen in any case is we make our recommendation on our best assessment following the scoring and the environmental attributes of the property relative to our open space ethic. And then then would still go into a whole negotiation phase with the township and the landowners to discuss issues of, first of all, what the assessment would be, and then what the conditions would be. One other thing to complicate this a little is note the acreage is listed as 17.6, and I put an arrow into 19.5, and the property owners are not exactly sure what the exact acreage is because there's conflicting information surrounding that. So I think these would be things to be ironed out at the next phase of the assessment and the actual discussion between the shareholders, as it were, and the township. So we're sort of operating from that standpoint, that we would give it an environmental evaluation, follow the score sheet, and make a recommendation from there. And then some of the details that normally I think come out in that next step will run their course.
Okay. Just like I said, I think that was one of the things that held it up before was some of them wanted to sell. And
Yeah, he stated that that's
we
been
were
resolved.
not interested in purchasing it
Yeah.
outright.
Yeah, I think they understand
And I
that.
think that the shareholders actually own surrounding properties,
Right.
and they want to keep it as open space. That seems to be their
Makes sense.
primary objectives, not to completely sell it. I suspect that, and this is just, I'm just surmising this, the fact that they came back to us after a failed attempt perhaps to sell it, they're probably looking at this more with eyes wide open.
Drew, I have a question, or not a question, a comment. I know that the information that you gave us for 2024-202, I don't think we can move forward with the appraisal until we have an envelope distinguished of the property that they want to conserve.
Yes,
So what Sandy did in the past, she would come in and sit down with she would talk it over with the property owner to see what they wanted conserved.
okay,
I mean, not,
right.
yeah, what they wanted conserved versus what they wanted to keep.
Okay,
And then she would come in and talk to the zoning officer and sit with him and draw this envelope on the property, get it approved by the homeowner, and then we could move forward with the appraisal, because we need that information for the gentleman who's doing the appraisal.
okay. So I would suggest, if it's okay, if we could vote on this recommendation, and then I will take the responsibility to retroactively visit each of these three property owners, ascertain where the line should be drawn, and bring it into to the acting planning officer, if that's suitable. Because I think we want to continue to move forward. I don't think that, I mean, I think if we make our recommendation, it's nothing but a recommendation, nothing's binding. And so if the next step, if the township would conclude that, well, there's not enough open space here to preserve, they want to maintain development potential for a larger parcel, then that would end the deal. But we can at least continue to move forward with this rather than make this an agenda item, which in my opinion, again, is really part of the negotiation between the township and the property owner, in much the same way that some of these other issues that used to be scoreable, like availability, public access, bargain sale. I mean, the reason we took them out of the assessment, the numerical assessment, was the individuals wouldn't know what the development potential would be valued at. So how could they make an assessment of whether they're willing to give a bargain sale, right? So I would view this the same way, but now having gone through this way, going forward, every property we'll assess, we'll have that conversation at the outset. That is to say, where are we drawing the lines?
Can I make a couple comments or questions?
Yes.
All right, so there's nothing in this scoring chart that reflects the size of the property,
Right.
right? May I make a recommendation that could be applied as a scoring point, because a larger parcel has more value in certain ways than others, okay, than something that's tiny, a postage stamp. So maybe that's one way to consider this. When I teach my class, my passing grade for some of the coursework that I do is like 80%, you know?
Right.
That's kind of a threshold for me. So the 2024-01 is that, it's 82.5. So it passes that. Something that's at 15 out of 23 does not. So you've mentioned this last meeting that there's not necessarily a threshold that we go by on this, but if I personally was gonna uphold a standard, I would say something should be a B or above for me to wanna say yes to this. The other side of this then is, you drive past this and it's nice to have this open space. Part of this property may be developed and part of it may be preserved, and there's maybe a way to look at it where what is adjacent to the roadside along Freedensville Road here is preserved, but that the other property that's kind of sandwiched in other development areas could be sub-parcel.
I mean, I think a big challenge that would require for development potential, they would have to subdivide these properties, I believe.
Right.
And in this township, I really don't know, well, I know a number of townships in this area, Lower Saucon's one, that developers usually describe that as almost cost prohibitive, that subdividing parcels would require that.
But at least the portion of it that runs with the river would make sense. You know what I mean? But maybe part of this in the back where there's already 4 or 5 or 6 other houses that are all sandwiched on top of each other.
We were, see, from our
That's
standpoint,
a little deceptive.
that hill
Right.
slope up there, what looks as a big field up here, in this portion of the property, is the most desirable developable property.
Right.
And therefore, be most important to preserve that as open space, rather than have it turn into, at one point, what spurred this whole operation, this whole consortium of people who bought that property, is condominiums were planned or proposed to go in there. And that's what directed them. So it's that parcel that is the one that actually becomes the most important one to add to the open space program, because that's
It
among
has
the most
higher
developable
developable
property.
Potential if you
Yeah.
took the
And
portion
then
off to the east of this.
to
that would have a
revisit
lower-
the issue of scoring it as a percentage and 80% is required.
That's just me.
I would think that, well, no, I would say that, from my standpoint with this, I would think we would have to revisit the whole score sheet, because we went through this several years ago. But I personally, when I look at this, I still think that things should be scored somewhat differently than they are, or I should say valued somewhat differently. And so before I would be in favor of putting a threshold of 70% or 80%, again, it's still an arbitrary, I mean, in my class is 60% passing. That's a D minus.
I'm still passing.
So, yeah, but again, every time I go through this process, I find myself scratching my head at some of the valuation that we have in this score sheet, that some things I think should be worth more.
Right, right.
But again, I don't think we can or should, at a regular meeting, try to change any of the scoring system. I think that requires a more careful evaluation. When we did that the last time, we did consult with someone who does this sort of thing professionally. But I think I think ag soil should be worth more and so forth, for example.
We Conserve PA,
Yes,
We Conserve,
right.
they have a whole open space network in there, and they have some webinars on grading and scoring, and, you know, it's not uniform, but it was very interesting to learn what is it that they're looking for, you
right.
know? So it was worthwhile to watch, to at least give you a perspective, because I'm a beginner too. So it helps you understand what is it that, and how did these different categories even come about in the first place?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would want to say yes to every property that you put before us, right? I'd want to preserve and protect every square inch that we possibly can, but at some point that's not realistic.
Right.
So where do we conserve?
Where do we draw the line?
Draw the line in some ways.
And sometimes there are places that really don't score close, like 10. Well, that's a harder sell to argue that, and especially if development potential is low, if it's not developable, it takes care of itself. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, and I understand your questions and your perspective too.
It would depend if it was desirable too. I mean, you could have a small plot of property that is desirable more so than a bigger acreage that's not, you know, pretty to look at, or you want to preserve. It could be a mess on that, but you could have a small piece of property that looks nicer that you'd want to probably preserve more than the larger area. So it's hard to do a percentage because each one has its individual values.
One of the interesting missing things here, for example, is, you know, banks these days, of course, require phase 1 investigations of properties to see what their past use was before they'll consider a loan, because in many cases, the past uses could have had significant impacts on groundwater contamination, leaky underground storage tanks, heavy metals, in this landscape, slag. And so it's kind of ironic that in many respects, we don't have a scoring item to consider past land use and whether the land has a potential to actually be heavily contaminated and become a liability. So this is imperfect, that is for sure.
Because you can own property and they could mine underneath it, and if you don't have the mining rights, I mean, that's another example. You wouldn't even know it's there.
Well, talking about previous uses, this area in the front here along Friedensville Road used to be a commercial swimming pool.
Yeah, he said that.
Yeah.
He asked me if I
I don't know
swam
if
in
that's
it.
good or bad. I know when I visited it, you could still see some of the concrete that was used for foundations and stuff like
Well,
that.
funny, I forgot that
He was,
that we were aware of that during our previous site visit. So are we ready to vote on whether to move this forward with the
Yes.
recommendation of council? All in favor? Aye. Again, Cheyenne, did you vote for that? I don't want to put a vote in your mouth.
I'm still looking at this. I'm just a little, I guess I'm a little confused. So they bought it with the intention of preserving it? For
They,
their,
well, not
Well-
developing it, as long as they own it, they could control it. What ends up happening, of course, is, and the primary, what would we call him? Sort of the.
President of the association.
Yeah.
President of the
President
association.
Association, he reiterated several times that none of them are getting any younger. And so their concern becomes having the next generation making different decisions. So,
no, I understand that. I guess my only reservation is it, so I'm reading like the zoning with the R80 there and see like what it is. I guess I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, is that a prime developable lot from a developer standpoint? And we're spending money on compared to others that might be better. So it's like working within a budget, I guess, is where I'm kind of hung up.
right,
You know, so I'm looking at this and I'm like, between the water that you have running through it and what you would have to do lot-wise and improvements, I personally don't feel like it would be a prime site for that type of development. I don't see it getting through.
They
all
just
requirements
sold
it would have
a
to meet.
different property for $1 million some, right? $1.5 million, right? An adjacent property, somebody sold their lot.
That's the guy where we parked at.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, he sold it for
So
$1 million.
I'm sure, if you would see it, I'm sure a developer would make something happen there.
Yeah. That large parcel up there that in this aerial photo looks like an open field that now has some trees is all perfectly developable.
Yeah.
There's nothing to mitigate that. It doesn't have,
Yeah, I mean,
There's no
that are too
problem
steep.
drainage, right?
The views are strong and.
the creek's on the
Is
very
that on
bottom of,
public sewer yet?
yes.
It has direct access to
Yes.
it.
Yeah, and the creek's right.
The creek's down by the river, or
Yeah,
the
no,
creek's
I
down
mean,
by the
I know
river.
the parcel well.
Oh, okay.
You know, and I know the parcel behind it as well, like, so I mean, I know the ground, and that's where I'm just kind of like, I don't see it being one of the prime sites that would be, but.
So what does our vote turn out to be? Those in favor, raise their hand and we can get a better count. Those are not in favor.
I'll be in favor of it. I mean, it's not the worst one. I guess I just want to make sure that we aren't missing an opportunity somewhere that could be better. But until that presents itself, who knows what that would be?
I understand.
Work with what you have.
Yeah,
How many other properties do we have in the queue?
none in the queue now.
No, and that's what I mean. Like I'm Pennsylvania Dutch. I got to be stingy about it.
The
Make
one
sure
thing
that I
that-
can make it stretch.
Yeah. The one thing that is actually interesting is, in the bigger scheme of things, is how much open space is there still available to actually preserve? I mean, it's going, but, and we're nowhere near close to not having sufficient funding. This is not an either-or situation that we're in. Normally, correct me, Alan, you've been involved in this the longest, and Laura Ray probably right the same. You were on open space. Laura, you've been on the EAC. Is it fair to say that 2 or 3 applicants a year is pretty much a reasonable number of what we see?
Yeah, we've never been swamped
Yeah.
any year.
Yeah, so just for perspective, I don't remember ever having more than 3, maybe 4 to look at. And some of the ones we looked at, there were reasons not to move forward with a positive recommendation. And we, in fact, several years ago solicited large property owners directly to inform them about the open space program, to encourage them to consider entering, and it really didn't create an uptick.
We discussed doing that again because it's been, I guess, quite a while, and, you know, people change, and we were talking about reinventing that wheel of
Yeah.
seeing if there's people in the township that would be interested that may be unaware. Maybe they're a new owner or whatever.
This could be another good opportunity for us to do that. And you're right, people change, property owners have changed as well. That's something I think we can discuss more completely, and we're gonna have, I'd like to just say that I intend to have an open space discussion more large the next meeting that I wanna put on the agenda.
Perfect.
That's why, for example, I distributed the one bit of information that shows what the referendum says. So that, at the moment, technically, I think our agenda item was to discuss these two properties rather than open space. But it is something I think we should discuss more completely. The other thing I would encourage everyone to do, because what always happens to me, I'm sure happens to most of you, right on the eve of our meetings, there's sort of a mad scramble. You're trying to read everything on the agenda and any complimentary or background information, and it's hard to get it done. So that's why I'm bringing this up looking forward, and that is in particular to look at the open space program as described on our website. There's actually a fairly comprehensive document there that would be useful to read moving forward. Okay. I'm going to get my computer woke up again so I can get back to the agenda. Okay, new business, the introduction of new members. We have new full voting members. They are Kathy Pitchell-McGovern.
Who are these people?
And Chad Heimbecker.
Yes.
So welcome to, we all know you, but to a voting status, which is, you've both been very active, and so I just want to say for the record, you've been good members. As associate members, you've been good contributing members to this committee. And so thank you for stepping up to the next level, and this will make it easier for us to continue to function effectively with a quorum. Everybody has busy professional lives, children, maybe caring for elderly parents, and so it's easy to miss a meeting for a very good, legitimate reason. So your stepping forward helps us tremendously.
I also want to say for the record, thank you for your kind words, Laura, because I did listen to the Lower Saucon Township Council meeting at 2:10 a.m. It was not
Oh, is
flattering.
that when this one came up?
Yes,
this
it
part?
was.
Yeah,
It was
so that's
2:10
why I was
a.m.
tired. Couldn't-
Not flattering. However, Laura was lovely. Thank you.
It was a battle, but.
And Laura was a little tired at 2 a.m., but she hung in there for us. So Chad, you know, she had little sleepy eyes going.
Ridiculous.
And then that brings us, it segues us right into the next item, which is we have 2 associate member positions available. They're advertised, but it would be good for us to talk to people who might have an interest or expertise that would benefit this committee's work and agenda, and in such cases, people will often ask existing members of a committee, well, what do they do? How can I contribute? So you can all serve as ambassadors in that regard, and you may have neighbors, friends that you are aware of that have the particular expertise and the desirability of putting the service time into the township.
Yeah, I spoke to 2 people already, and they have an interest.
Okay.
Yeah, same. We had no applicants.
One, but they need to get more information back to me.
So hopefully, I mean, it would be great if by the next meeting, we have several applicants and
Yeah.
resumes and statement of purpose and interest, and hopefully we can discuss these candidates. What had happened for most of the years of my experience on this committee, and again, I rely on Alan and Laura Ray, who have more experience than I do, that normally applicants' files would come to this committee for review, and then we would make a recommendation to Township Council, and they would deliberate and then make the appointments. That hasn't always been the way it has gone, but for the majority of the years that I've been involved, that was my experience, and that was what I experienced when I expressed an interest in serving. So hopefully we will have applicants and we can assess their interest levels and backgrounds, and hopefully we can enrich the expertise on this committee.
What about the student position?
And the student position, that's, again, usually it comes from students applying. Right now, I don't think there are students on council, are there?
It goes before council, in one of the upcoming meetings, and once it goes before council, they'll start.
There is a person or 2? Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah. We've been underrepresented sometimes perfectly seated with respect to students. There again, talk to your neighbors if you know of ambitious young people in the school system in particular. That's the easiest way, or someone that's being homeschooled, what have you. The next item is the baseline water quality data program. As I understand the sequence of events, Kathy did some snooping, right, and found this through the Pennsylvania Municipal Leaders Funding and Resource Guide. I thought you were the one that discovered it. It's not important in terms of our current discussion.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
Because you've been a very active associate member.
Yes.
You worked your way through the PA Municipal Leaders Funding and Resource Guide, because this was actually buried in there when I had to do a word search to find it.
And I read it too, that's where I came up and was like, okay.
So I thought what I would do, because of my geology and hydrogeology expertise, I looked into this, and so I'd be willing to give you an assessment of where we stand and the viability.
So the idea was, it was an idea, because I saw it. We were discussing with Springtown and the watershed, and we hadn't done an evaluation in years, and like since 1990s.
I think that was all based off their.
Correct, and that's when I saw that, because we were discussing it here, and we were discussing that it would be nice to see where we are now and to evaluate our own water source. That was yes, I remember now. Yes, yes, yes. And it's a grant.
Right.
So that's the thing.
When I looked into this, let me give you a little bit more background for perspective. So one of the key questions here is, this grant is designed to establish baseline water quality data for private wells or springs, private water supply sources. So one of the things I did was contact the Lower Saucon Authority to try to get a sense of where they have water service available to township residents versus where township residents are pretty much limited to their own water supply. Their website says that about 56 or 5,700 township residents are supplied by them. And by and large, this isn't perfect, but I know that I was able to see a map of the water supply system, which I can't share because this translates into homeland security issues. They don't want water supply pipelines. I experience this in a lot of my professional life. Information on dams, all sorts of things that used to be readily available just turned black. But this is a fair assessment. They provide water more or less west of Hellertown to Steel City to the north, and a bit to the south, roughly to, say, Leithsville. So if you imagine the township line converging at a point to the south, you can kind of draw a line at roughly Leithsville, give or take, east-west. And so people south of that line, east of Hellertown, north of Hellertown, excluding Steel City and some of the Apple Butter Road corridor for a portion of it, have access to public water, in essence, through the Lower Saucon Authority. So everybody east of that, everybody at the extreme southern part of the township, and at the extreme northeast part of the township do not have access to public water. So that would be the portion of our residents who have to rely on private water supply, okay? So that's who we're talking about. Of course, the municipal water supplies are tested and evaluated. Hellertown, in the middle of the sort of Lower Saucon surround envelope, has their own water supply. Furthermore, it's important to realize that unlike sewage, if you have access to public sewage, you have to hook up. If you have access to public water, you're not required to be connected. So some people within these envelopes of having water available through Lower Saucon Authority are not connected. So there's also people scattered in that general region I mentioned that are restricted to, or have restricted themselves to public water. At the outset, I think in discussing this previously, I pointed out something that's really rather ignominious for Pennsylvania to claim, that we're one of 3 states that doesn't require water testing for public water use, private water use. So that's where we stand. Any individual can have their water tested on their own. To get back to the specifics of this grant, this requires a significant effort to write a proposal. It requires, in fact, that it be written by a professional licensed geologist. I am one, I could do that, but to do this in a way that I would feel that the grant would have a legitimate chance of being funded would require a lot of manpower be identified and brought it to bear to sample. One of the things that's really strange about these sorts of things are, at a glance, you might think that people would love to have their private water supplies tested because they would want to know. To give you an example of why people were sometimes surprisingly reluctant, we can cite the Palmerton area as an example. Much of that landscape is a Superfund site from contamination from New Jersey zinc.
Keep it.
People in that area are very reluctant to have anybody sample their soil, their groundwater, because the double-edged sword of sampling is the good edge of the sword lets them know what their soil quality is and their water quality. The other side of the sword might limit their property values dramatically. So things of this sort usually are not as obviously attractive to residents because of what they might find out that might compromise their property value, might require them to do with their water supply. So this would be a huge lift.
Are the results published?
I'm sorry?
Are the results?
Often when you have public monies involved, I'm not sure. I would
think so.
imagine what would happen is they would not publish the results of any individual's property, but there would be a statistical summary.
Lower
X
Saucon
number of
Township.
wells were tested, these are the range of values, these are the parameters that were evaluated. This ultimately is available statewide, but it was the outcome of the development of Marcellus Shale development, where there is a strong push to try to get background data, and in fact the residents want that background data so that they can determine and ascertain whether local Marcellus development is responsible for a change in water quality. I think because it's public funded, it has to be available to the state because ultimately these are state funds. So even though we're outside of Marcellus natural gas development here, we would be eligible to submit a proposal. But I think the impetus of residents is much less because unless there's impending land use change around them that they might be concerned would impact what they believe to be high water quality to begin with, there's really no motivation for people. What I think might be a more sensible approach may be to publicize to the township residents that have private water supply that there are opportunities for them to have their water tested and evaluated. It would be done so privately. Usually those results get published too as broad-based summary data. For example, there is data on Northampton County right now through most of this testing that's readily available is through the Penn State Extension.
In Greystone, they'll do it twice a year.
You have to pay for it's a modest fee. It's actually really a equivalent of a discounted fee to have your water tested, and you could choose what level of testing you want. The standard testing, which does things like pH, total dissolved solid, total bacteria, E. coli bacteria, and then there are higher levels of testing that the price scale goes along with it. In that case, I think we could effectuate some change in this area to get people to look into their water supply in more of a private manner by publicizing it somehow, either through our EAC website or through maybe having a blurb put in the next, or one of the upcoming township newsletters. We just received a township newsletter this week. And so it's something I think we could discuss. I did reach out to Penn State Extension, Northampton County Penn State Extension, people to see if there is a shorter, more direct set of links where residents can directly see what's available to them. It's again, to use the metaphor of a double-edged sword, there's a plethora of information on the Penn State Extension. The challenge is sometimes it can be difficult to find out what's readily available to you and cut right to the chase with what kind of testing's available, what's tested. They do a great job of describing the issues, they have videos that explain how you might interpret data if you had your water tested. So I would think that a sensible thing for us to consider moving forward might be to better publicize some of this and share information with township residents and see if we can at least improve the situation that way.
So
I'm not adverse to someone writing a grant and going after these funds. I could just say from a personal, professional moment, I have too much research going on otherwise right now to do it myself.
2 comments. One is Penn State Extension, the co-op is by Graysdale. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
The name's escaping me right now. They have, like every 4 months, they do have free well water testing. I have that information available. So that's one thing you can give to the public. Okay. That's fine. Just so maybe I misunderstood. I thought when Springtown came here, we were discussing more our, where Lower Saucon Township's water is coming from, what the quality of the water is and the volume, because we were talking about how it changes. So I wasn't looking at this particular grant, and maybe I was, again, and I apologize, I wasn't looking at Lower Saucon Township's water quality. I was looking at Lower Saucon Township's availability of water, because we were discussing reevaluating and reassessing the whole watershed at that meeting. We were talking about it. We were, so somewhere in there, maybe I got my wires mixed. I wasn't talking about testing my well, her well, and his well, and trying to get an overall picture of Lower Saucon Township's quality. It was more of, do we have enough? Where is it coming from? Because that's what we were discussing at that meeting. Right. So I assumed, as I was reading this, because it gets very technical, it wasn't more about a well, it was more about the water, the overall water source.
Right. The issue, though, is where it becomes a well issue is to try to actually assess the quality of the water, you need groundwater samples. And so the only places you could legitimately get groundwater samples are either in existing wells or a program of drilling new wells for the purpose of monitoring, which is we'd go through $250,000 in a blink with that, or it's spring sources. But you have to have what we call ground truthing of water quality. You have to collect samples. There's no other way. Springs are tricky and can be misleading insofar as there are several levels of springs that exist. You might recall from my presentation previously, there are some very shallow source springs, and then there are deeper bedrock springs. With some shallow source springs, you could get very non-representative water quality that's strongly influenced by biology in the shallow system. Just as an example, without getting into the detail, I experience this reasonably often where people come to me and say, someone is contaminating my water with petroleum. And I say, well, how do you know? Did you test it? No, but I can see the sheen that you see when there's a little gas spill at the gas station, even in a puddle. And usually when I'm told that, I know that it's not petroleum at all, but there's a bacteria that metabolizes iron. One of the names for it is, I'm not sure if this is a species or a genus, is bacillus. And some people call it iron bacillus because it metabolizes iron. It's pretty common in any landscape that has iron in the minerals. And so you see this sheen in a wetland or a spring and immediately assume it must be petroleum. But it's a simple natural metabolite of these bacteria. And so if you sample those shallow waters, sometimes you will get a bad water quality reading, but it may be reflective of only a small area and even a strong seasonal impact. So really, to get a true assessment of groundwater requires deeper water wells. And so that's why I jumped to the well testing, because otherwise you could model things with a lot of assumptions, but if you model things with a lot of assumptions, the value of the outcome is based on the quality of your assumptions. Now, a thought might, and so stepping back further to the Springtown visit, that was somewhat of the motivation for this. They paid to have that. I should even mention I'm pretty sure I know who the consulting firm was that did it, but there's no sense putting it in the record again without it for sure. But they had paid a well-known groundwater consulting firm to evaluate it, and they did testing of wells and so forth, and that's a very expensive endeavor. So it would be an interesting question to see if this type of program would pay for an assessment from an existing consulting firm. This may be a source of funding to try to apply to that scenario. At the township level, as I mentioned, I think in our last meeting, it's very difficult for me to imagine Lower Saucon Township paying for a similar study for private wells, because there's not a cost benefit to the township per se. Interestingly enough, I did talk to my friend who's on the Hellertown Water Authority to ask if they ever did a similar study. You recall I said I would do that, and I finally did. And in the time that he's been on the board, they haven't, or on the authority, and they must not have done it any time recently, because he would have been aware of that information. Someone on the history of that board or authority would have said, oh, by the way, we did this study. DEP samples their water, for example, and he's done some assessment of spring source for those springs, but they've not undergone a similar assessment. And I think the main reason is it's very expensive. And so what they're doing, which I think is a legitimate approach, is to have DEP and do their own testing of the water coming out of the spring. And until that water passes some threshold of being unsuitable, they're not going to invest in it. So I think we have a cost limit. I think it's great that you dug this out. It is something that I'm not going to personally sweep off the table and say, I'm too busy right now. This gives me food for thought, because down the line, this might be something.
So the next question is, do we have enough water? We being Lower Saucon Township, Hellertown, Springtown. So you almost wonder if you could get the townships together to do this grant, which is not an EAC. I saw it and we were discussing it.
You would end up though with, to be able to spread out to other townships, the watershed boundaries are going to dictate whether they're interested. So the minute you go further south of the drainage divides between us and the southern townships and authorities, they're not going to be interested, because they're out. And the way this township is situated, we're pretty much in the Lower Saucon watershed. And so it's going to be hard to find allies. I would just say, to assuage concerns of do we have enough water for the current land use distribution, the data suggests that we do.
How about future developments?
That's why we have the open space program.
Right, it all kind of ties together.
We can't take all the land. I mean, there's going to be developers, just like these people that want to build this thing across the street. Fortunately, it's public water supply. But I'm sure there's developers looking around to see what they can build out there where we live. So, that's the thing. They keep building without doing any research about how much water is in the ground. As part of the thing, the discussion that we had with Springtown, I looked up their, that recent study that they did, that Springfield Township did. And in there, they have a wellhead,
Protection area?
a wellhead protection ordinance, which goes into effect for any property where you have more than 3 homes, I guess. It's not for an individual
Right.
property. It's very extensive. You should look it up. And we should have something like that in our township too.
I mean, one thing I would say, just again, to generally assuage fears, the 2-acre lot size minimum helps us substantially because that generally is designed to offset concerns of significant impervious cover. Lawns often generate more runoff than people imagine. Good dense lawns do offset some of the groundwater recharge and water seeping to the ground, but it's still an order of magnitude greater than impervious surface and pavement and so forth. So I would just say, from my years living here and my knowledge of this landscape, I'm not worrying about will we have sufficient water. Water quality is always an ongoing issue, and the only thing that gives me pause is this most recent push in this region to put warehouses in. The warehouses are by definition impervious rooftops, and the paved parking areas around them are paved, and the access roads are paved, and that generates impervious surfaces. That would be an area where I think if we're trying to manage water resources, that would be the first place to look. Fortunately, again, our main water recharge areas are these Redding Prong upland landscapes. The only real threat we have to impervious surface of upland landscapes is the obvious one. It's converting a forested mountain on the north end of the landscape to landfills, which have by definition impervious liners at the base and impervious covers on top. That's the biggest single threat we have in this township. Unfortunately as well, we don't have control over the landscape at the core of our lowlands in the Bethlehem area, which used to be the Coke Works, where we have a proliferation of landfills, and any other of our lowland carbonate terrains, which are also recharge areas. Warehouses are a major threat to water recharge.
Where the Coke Work was, that's all warehouses. That's
Yes.
wall-to-wall warehouses, and it's all paved.
Yes.
So it's all impervious there.
And a lot of that was already in essence somewhat impervious where they dumped
Or, yeah,
slag.
it was bad.
Before
The slag is as soon as that, as soon as mineralogical precipitation happens, when that slag cools and evolves, that generally becomes impervious too. So maybe a conversation for us to put on an agenda at a future time is a question of land use and warehouse development.
That would be wonderful.
Because that is a direct threat to groundwater recharge and groundwater resource management.
Well, I know the Lower Saucon Water Authority, they purchased their water from Bethlehem because we get analysis from it. Because
Yes.
all Steel City is Bethlehem water.
Right. Yeah, the authority gets their water, or Lower Saucon Authority gets their water from them,
Right.
which is mostly Pocono sourced
Poconos,
water.
right,
And
for
I
the
think they
reservoir.
have some agreement with Hellertown Water Authority
Yeah.
to augment or.
Augment it, yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I add something for
yes.
new business next time? I meant to. I sent Kathy a note about, did we have a budget?
Oh,
And
yes.
she came back and said, it'd be great if we worked on a budget. And there is a small budget that's put under conservation, but I think that would be a great thing to work on so that we could propose it.
So you're suggesting that we look into this for another meeting agenda?
Yeah, I don't want to go into it
Yes.
because I realized it wasn't there, but if we could.
Yes,
get it
because
put
there are
on.
opportunities to attend education, to
Yeah.
meetings, to already existing consortiums or environmental
Yeah.
agencies.
Like they have supplies, dues, community events, contribution, and minor equipment that go under this budget. So if I could just ask that it be added, so we can do a budget and we'll know, and like,
Budget season coming up.
yeah, so if we could add that.
And we have another hearing this Friday in Northampton County Court for the environmental easement for the dump. So it's 9 o'clock, courtroom 10, Northampton County, again. And that's for Bethel Township and for the DNL to be parties.
There was a good attendance at that last hearing.
Oh, yeah, we got them all.
So hopefully, people attend if they can. I intend to be there, as a show of support, and it's also educational.
Well, I went through Bethel Township and made them people aware that mountain can go away and what they're looking at and what can happen there and how it will impact their lives. So hopefully I'm getting them to attend. So it's not just this township problem, it's a multiple township problem all along the Lehigh there.
Right.
So it's not just our problem, it's their problem as well.
And like many of these things, people are unaware, generally run aware of so many things, and I think that's a prime example. When they hear landfill expansion, they just think of the footprint as it stands and move a little bit more up Apple Butter, a little bit to the south or to the west, and don't realize what this really involves. So, okay, we have no developer items. There's no public to comment. So that brings us to updates and reports. We'll work our way through them step by step. We have some great stuff to discuss here and to just make ourselves aware of. We'll begin, Alan, with Climate Action Plan update from you.
Well, like I told you last week, the Climate Action Plan has not started yet. What's going on right now is the Act 167 Stormwater Management Plan. So I attended the second meeting, which was on August the 15th, and they finally got around to publishing their presentation. I just got it yesterday. I sent it to everybody in an email. Did you get it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, everybody can read through this themselves. There's just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. The land use and land cover changes in Lehigh County and Northampton County are a big thing because there's been a lot of development that's going on. And all the development increases the impervious coverage areas, and the impervious coverage areas increase the amount of stormwater runoff. Okay, let me see. I've underlined a couple of things here, just to read them. One of the purposes, to recap one of the purposes, is to create a consistent, up-to-date stormwater ordinance, which is pretty much the same for the whole Lehigh County and Northampton County area. Everybody will be expected to include that in their local ordinances. And part of that will be to update the hydraulic analysis to reevaluate the runoff control standards. They talked a lot about that at the meeting, but I didn't understand it because I couldn't hear the speaker. Okay. They're kind of like in a data acquiring phase right now. They have a lot of different ways that they're going to acquire data of existing land use and vegetation cover and streams. And one of the ways that they plan to acquire data is to have each township fill out a survey of some kind or another. Laura, did you see whether or not Lower Saucon got the survey from them yet?
Doesn't ring a bell, so.
Okay.
No.
I'd like to know what it is when you get it. Okay, county responsibilities. One of the county's responsibilities is to consult with the municipalities through the Watershed Plan Advisory Committee. So a Watershed Plan Advisory Committee is going to be created by the counties. And we'll see what that's going to be all about when they reveal that. Municipal responsibility, that's where we come in. And underline those. Participate in the plan development, review the draft plan and provide comments, adopt the necessary ordinances to control stormwater runoff after the plan is approved by DEP, and implement the plan through enforcement of new stormwater ordinances. Okay, that's a lot of stuff that townships are going to have to do. They're also investigating water quality levels. And if I remember from one of the plans that are on the website, that includes, just actual chemicals. So that'll be interesting to see how they're going to do that and what they come up with. An interesting thing is that detention basins control the rate of stormwater, runoff into the streams, but not the volume, because eventually the basins are emptied and you get the full volume of the storm. Increased volume can cause increased flows downstream in the watershed. See, they're worrying about the whole watershed.
So when you're speaking about retention basins, I know in my development, the township put the retention basins in, but they don't maintain them. So I actually had to rent a piece of equipment to clean it out because they refused to clean it out. So over time it gets full of silt and it's not functional. So I actually had to rent a machine to clean it out. So the township doesn't clean them out, which they should, they put them in.
I don't know, from what I remember, it's the responsibility of the person who owns the property that the detention detention basin is on to maintain the detention
The
basin.
person has to maintain it themselves.
Yeah.
But that again is one of those rather poorly publicized realities.
Yeah, because I didn't know about that.
Yeah. We once had, as an aside, one of our most interesting open space application was from an individual on Granite Hill who had a floodwater retention pond parcel on their property. They wanted us to consider preserving it as open space. So a way to offset the cost perhaps of paying for a piece of equipment to maintain it.
Right.
One of the things they did at the meeting was they asked us to submit, they gave us a piece of paper to write it down on, what problem areas we could remember in our township. So I submitted the intersection of Easton Road and Lower Saucon Road, because I know that floods all the time. And I submitted the Hellertown, Water Street and Main Street intersection, because I know they have a lot of flooding problems down there. And I submitted the Apple Butter Road area behind the treatment plant, where that tight curve is.
Yep.
That floods there all the time. So those are the three things that I could think of. So that's the kind of information they're looking for.
Also, where the Southern Creek crosses the highway, the main road there, that floods out too. Sometimes you can't even get over the bridge. Since they raised the bridge, it's not as bad of a problem as it used to be, because at some point you couldn't get
412.
Where the, yeah, where the baseball
Right,
fields are.
right.
That used to flood really bad.
And they mention in this handout, possible ordinance changes. One of them is a green infrastructure standard. And I think what they mean by that is they're gonna try to use green infrastructure on properties, on properties that somebody wants to develop to retain the stormwater on the property. I think that's gonna be the main way that they wanna do it, the preferred way. And if the developer can demonstrate that that's impossible, then I think they'll allow them to go to the type of a thing where they dig like a French drain in the ground, and they drain the stormwater into that. Which makes me want to ask you the question: what do you think about that way of getting rid of stormwater as far as the soaking into the ground? And
It's a design, I mean, it's like everything, it's complex in this respect. If you have non-carbonate terrain, usually that's a reasonable thing to do, and if your water's coming in reasonable quality, where is it being collected, okay? Where it becomes tricky is when you're in carbonate rocks, and when you start feeding water into the subsurface, you don't know what the subsurface dissolution channels look like in the rock. These floodwater retention ponds often trigger sinkholes in carbonate landscapes, often. And so it can be dicey because then you're doing something, you're pushing something to the subsurface relatively blindly. Unless you do intensive geophysics and drilling to see what the quality of the bedrock is, you might be generating sinkholes.
Okay.
Quick example, if you remember Concept Sciences exploding up by the airport industrial area some years ago, that when the fire suppression system came in and then they went and tried to suppress the fire, that floodwater retention pond right next to it had a remarkable sinkhole with a throat right into a cave system. So you have to be careful in carbon. It's why carbonates are sensitive environmentally. So, okay, is that it, Alan?
And there was one more possible ordinance change that I wanted to mention, which I don't know exactly why they put this in here, but they must have a reason for it. Solar arrays to help manage stormwater. And of course, the riparian buffer standard's probably gonna be changed, and the small detention infiltration bio retention standards will be changed. So anyway, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Can I ask something then? Or maybe it's, okay. So educate me a little bit here. We talk about the ordinances, maybe looking at them when they're gonna get revised. What's the timeline do they have for all of
They
this?
figured this whole program will probably take 2 years.
Okay. So we talk about the development in this township with regards to warehouses and impervious services, and where are we at this point right now? Where, I guess, what happens to that water, right? Does it,
In a site-by-site basis, usually with development, they use the existing stormwater management regulations as their limits and guidelines. And so then
are from 91 or, right, as we discovered.
And so
in
they
this?
will then, when the engineers develop the plan for the site, they'll follow the best standard practices, best practices, and regulations, and develop the site plan within that context.
Okay.
And generally speaking, as long as they're meeting the standards of the stormwater management regulations, that goes forward.
Right.
The thing is that they're gonna change those standards because with the existing ones haven't been doing a good job.
Right.
So that's what this is all about, this plant study.
What other, like you were saying, what other solutions and technologies exist out there rather than just a retention pond? Is there some other collection device that you can meter the flow out at a slower rate? So
those are the sorts of things that the hydrologist engineers are evaluating.
Yeah. And one of the things that they're really gonna push is vegetation on the site. So if somebody buys, like, say 5 acres of land, they wanna put up a big building, and they find out that they won't be able to put up as big a building as they want to, because they gotta use 2 acres to plant rain gardens to keep the water on their land. So it's gonna restrain, I think, the size of the developments that can go on the existing properties. That's, I mean, they didn't, it's just the ideas that I get from reading the latest stormwater plan that's been developed is the Monocacy Creek Watershed Stormwater Plan. It has all the latest explanations in it.
Okay. On the solar end of things, I've seen some new technologies with solar going over agricultural fields and canals, where it helps the water be retained instead of evaporating off farmlands, right?
Maybe
So
it has something to do with
it's interesting new technologies and ways to use that solar surface in different environments where you wouldn't, and you get compounding benefits from it. So.
It's fascinating.
Anything that can increase the evaporation would be good.
Right.
Or infiltration. Okay, so moving.
Hang on, there is a member of the community that texted me, and we have to go back a step or two. She wants it on the record that there are 6 wells in Steel City, and she wants to make sure that we're aware that there are still wells in Steel City. It's not all Bethlehem water.
I have my own well yet, and most people, but everybody in there has their own wells.
Well, you must have a neighbor, because she just texted me, and she wants me to put it on the minutes.
So do you pay for your own water?
No,
Yes.
I don't.
How do you do that annually, regularly?
It's every 3, it's every 3 months.
Oh, okay.
Right here, Lower Saucon Authority.
Okay. You take a water sample over and you've done it? Or?
No, it's Bethlehem Water, so when they do their analysis, I look at that.
Oh.
Because it's basically
Okay.
Bethlehem Water. But my well, I had tested, my water was okay. It didn't contaminate it, but my well's down 360 feet too.
Okay, but just to clarify, this program, this grant that we could apply for potentially would cover for individual residents?
Yes.
It pays for individual residents to have their wells?
If it has to be part of what this has to be, there has to be a research plan put into place.
Right.
You can't simply write a simple grant, say,
Right.
we would like you to pay for residents to have their water sampled.
More than
You're
that.
trying to establish a baseline, you would have to establish a set of protocols for why you want to sample the wells you want to sample. It would be a standard research proposal that you'd have to submit as I read this.
Would the impact of the landfill and the surrounding
That can be part of your impetus, but your sampling pattern, your sampling protocols and where you want to sample would have to be couched within the existence of the landfill, et cetera.
Okay, but this isn't just to say, like, as a resident, I can apply and get a.
No, it's much more comprehensive than that.
But before I built up there, I asked the township, was there a chance of city water coming up to Steel City? And they said no. 2 years later, after I spent 10 grand for a hole in the ground, they were going to cap my well, and I said, no way. I said, and then same thing they told us, the guy just built a house there, how long is the landfill going to be up there? 4 to 5 years. They said that to me in 1983. Everybody's moved up there and built a house that said the same thing for the township.
Do you have reverse osmosis or anything on your?
No, I just have filters on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a member of the community here maybe three meetings ago, and he talked about having.
Yeah, reverse osmosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people up there have water treatment systems on their water.
That's all, yeah,
But
all of
that's
that.
one of
When
those
you have,
added costs.
you have a private
should
well.
be offset some way, I would think.
if you have a private well or a spring, it is your responsibility to treat your water to meet your own standards.
Yes.
That's what I believe is crazy from the state, lack of regulation. But
Yeah.
okay, so moving on through other updates and reports, this brings us to tire recycling. Kathy, you can give us update on that? That's this
Having
weekend.
a tire recycling program on Saturday from 9 to 12. I need help. God bless Carol and Kathy from Hellertown. Oh my God, they've been lovely. I just hope it's successful.
Thank you for setting that all up.
Around the neighborhood about tires.
Thank you.
I want to be there. Unfortunately, I'm having an 11-year-old's birthday sleepover party the night before.
Girl
so-
or boy?
Boy.
Oh, well.
I don't know if I can commit to being there.
I would appreciate if you can come. I understand if you cannot come. You might need like a couple shots of
Espresso, and then I'll
espresso.
be ready to go.
Now, what time is it again?
9 to 12. I'm
9 to
gonna be
12.
there at 8.
Do you think you have enough help?
I think so. I don't know. We'll see. Did you catch that?
And 2 weeks later, go ahead.
No, that's it.
2 weeks later, September 28th, we have the fall cleanup, earth recycling. So Chad, that brings you
Needs help.
as the point person.
Yes, and I think we're okay. My son's soccer game got moved from that day, so I'm completely open. I have no conflicts. I'll be there the whole time.
list. Are you good with your
I
list?
do, yeah.
Yeah,
Because I don't remember what I
I don't
put.
remember what I said.
I wrote down 9 to 12, but I don't know.
You got everybody, I think we have plenty. We're good.
And I signed up for,
Put it in your calendar.
I'm out of town that weekend and I'm tied up with college business this Saturday.
what's the date on
The next point of information, I think this is just basically purely a point of information. Bethlehem landfill fall cleanup coupons for residents on October 5th, 2024. Jennifer, you raised the issue of if we have a budget, I think in connection with the We Can Serve PA event. Is that true?
Well,
In any
my
ways.
point for bringing up the budget, let me go quickly, was why not be members? I mean, we get a lot, but if there's a membership and we budget for it, then that was part of that discussion. But the EAC, normally we do a round, right? And you submit in the past for this fall conference. How do you want us to do it this year? To cover it?
I thought that you were gonna bring it up last month.
It wasn't open, we did bring it up, and it
But I
wasn't.
mean,
Have cost
brought up
details
to
yet.
Laura so that she can bring it up to council to approve any fees to be
Well,
reimbursed.
they didn't have it open for registration, so we didn't even know any of the numbers.
I thought I had $75 written on the last agenda, because I did call and she said 75.
By the way, while you're talking about that, Jennifer, we're not members.
I know.
So if we can be members, then you would get it discounted and then we would have accessibility to other things.
Right,
I asked and they said, no, our Saucon Township EAC is not a member.
right.
Is this the remote or on-site one again?
This is
But-
on site.
On-site. And we didn't have the information on anything last time.
No, they hadn't opened it,
Yeah.
and so.
So registration is what? In
they
3
wanna-
days?
They wanna close it by the 13th.
No, that's
Oh,
just
for a
early,
discount.
yeah.
Or the
That's just early
discount.
registration.
And where is this
95.
located?
Friday.
It's
And
in,
Jennifer, maybe, I don't know if Carol's picking you up on the microphone there either.
October 5th.
It's October 5th,
That's the date of the event.
yeah, and it's at Temple.
Temple.
Ambler? Is it the Ambler campus?
And so it's 75 if we do it by Friday, 95 after per person.
Looking forward, what does membership cost, do you know?
That's what I'm, yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know off the top of my head, I looked it up.
10-5 is the landfill.
Yeah, we're not doing anything with that.
We're not doing anything, we're not attending that.
That's
event.
just
Yeah,
information.
no.
I have a game at 10:45. So I won't be able to make this
Yeah,
anyways.
I'm at a wedding in New York, but I would like, if we could be a member, that would be, because there's a lot of other information in there.
Laura,
There's
do
a
you plan
remote
on
access.
going? There's not?
If I would do remote.
Yeah, I would do remote too.
Yeah, I don't know that they offer. They do some, but not this, not this. Are you looking to go? I might like to go, yes. I think they don't have to be somewhere else on the
So wait, I'm the only one going to the Field Conference of Pennsylvania Geologists that weekend?
You are.
You win that one.
You could take my place and go to a wedding and I'll go to the geologist conference.
Anybody wanna go to soccer game?
No, good, I'm good. Been
done
there,
it.
done that.
Okay, so what we should think about too then is whether we should, going forward, look into trying to fund EAC to belong to We Can Serve PA.
Right.
If there's programming and information that would benefit our functioning, then that would seem like a sensible thing to do.
So back to this, is there two of us that want to go? That's all I hear.
I gotta check my schedule.
So what do we need to do? Well, I mean, there is budget dollars in there.
So if there are budget dollars, we should be able to request that directly from the township manager, right? Or does it have to go through council?
It has to be voted on for council.
Council.
I did have on August 13th with the $75 fee, and then I guess it was tabled to this month. So, I mean, you can, last year, I think what we did was, Laura brought it up to council, they approved it for $75, which was, or whatever the fee was, the discounted fee. They approved the discounted fee, and anything after that, you would have to incur. You paid for it, and then we reimbursed.
I don't remember it being a reimbursement. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure I went, and you all paid for it.
Yeah.
You took the names, you submitted it, and it got
Well,
paid.
see, there are different segments that you have to fill out yourself, which is why.
I'm just saying what happened last year.
Okay.
Yeah, because I didn't get reimbursed. I didn't pay.
So is the appropriate
Township
step here, if people are interested in going, that we make a motion that township provide funding, to the township council to provide funding
Yeah, we
for
have to
one or more
request.
members to attend?
The approval, right.
And we have the monies in our budget.
Well, the budget that's there under conservation. Yes.
So even though we have an allocated EAC budget,
It's not EAC, it says conservation.
oh, is that the
Which
hang up?
is-
Don't forget
Ambiguous?
the
Never mind, they
recycling
call it.
program is $5,500,
Okay,
and that wasn't budgeted for that full amount.
okay.
Mhm.
And then you have
I
the
thought-
tire recycling,
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
another, item that
Yeah,
was.
yeah, I'm with you.
So there are many things.
I thought it was an EAC budget, I
Why don't we
apologize.
solicit any sponsorships for that stuff locally?
So can we get, for the budget, for us to work on next time, what we've paid out last year and this year, just so we know when we submit?
I can see if Kathy can do that.
Yeah, okay.
You had a question, Cheyenne?
Yeah, why don't we try to solicit sponsorships for some of those things to offset costs, so it's not coming out of pocket?
Things such as tire recycling and
Yeah,
electronic?
like local businesses, if they're interested in, sponsoring the event.
I think we probably haven't done it because it's been hard enough for us just to get it scheduled on short notice. But if, on the other hand, we're looking forward to, say, next year's agenda or next year's, now that we're functioning as a more aggressive EAC, now I think we have a better sense of what sorts of things we want to try to sponsor. And given time, then perhaps we could try to solicit support. That would be my sense of it. But I think the reason we haven't has just been that it's been difficult enough just to plan these things. Okay, so then that brings us to fall adopt a road cleanup.
Yeah, we're gonna postpone that to October, because I don't have a date yet.
October, okay. That usually happens later, we don't do it
Good.
this time of year. Okay, and then that brings us to plastic bag ban. You did notice again, this issue of last minute things, put together a list of links to provide information on a potential plastic bag ban. Laura's gonna take the lead here in a moment, but I would just say, one thing that reading through the literature, two things. One, watching one of our Lower Saucon Township meetings makes clear to me that if we want to try to promulgate a plastic bag ban, it behooves us for all reasons to be thorough in our evaluation, It was brought up at the New York Times article was brought up at the township meeting that was represented as an example of how California's plastic bag ban was a complete failure. But in reality, if you read that article and then dig into the literature, the preponderance of data and evidence that I read indicate that single-use plastic bag bans can be very effective. And the devil is in the details. That to do it effectively, one has to be a city, a township, a state, has to be very careful in developing their plan. The biggest failure of the California single-use plastic bag ban was to replace them with so-called multi-use plastic bags, which were just slightly more muscular single-use plastic bags that were available for 10 cents each, which people then just threw out. That's not a failure of a single-use plastic bag ban. That's a failure of a single-use plastic bag ban that was not well thought out and designed to have people use reusable bags over and over and over again, as opposed to 10 or 20 cent bags.
And if I could add, I want to be sure that when we bring up a topic, it's for research. I felt that the EAC was looking into it, we're exploring it, and for the record, it was not something that we were proposing to go forward to council or anything. And I think we should feel comfortable about having these discussions and knowing that we shouldn't feel uncomfortable about doing the research, finding the evidence, and having the facts to support it before we go forward. So I'd just like to make sure that's on the record.
Yeah, and in this case, I think this is really important that we do a little more research on this. And so I'll leave it there because Laura Ray, I may already have said things you wanted to cover, but I just think we should be comprehensive and careful.
Yeah, so this really, I see this as being, we need to have like a separate little subgroup to work on this because we don't all want to sit here and talk for 2 hours on plastic bags. So I think a subgroup to do some research. I'd like to figure out who wants to be involved. So as long as we don't have a quorum, we can go ahead. I have a Zoom call set up for whoever wants to be involved in this group with Faran Savitz from Penn Environment for September 24th, which is, I just lost it, I think it's a Tuesday.
Sorry, Laura, could you repeat that date?
September 24th. Yeah, it's a Tuesday night. So in 2 weeks, gonna do a Zoom call in the evening with Faran Savitz from Penn Environment, and he's worked with a bunch of municipalities on doing these bans, mostly in southeastern Pennsylvania. It's tons of information, so I can share the links that he provided and lots of facts and figures. But when I talked to him, I said, we really kind of need some guidance on how do you start doing, where do you start, how to do it in a logical manner, how to get your community on board, how to discuss with businesses. So it's not something you just ram through in, the next meeting where you have it on the agenda and think we're making a ban. It doesn't work like that. It's a long process to make sure you do it right and make sure people are on board with it. So if I can have the names of who wants to be involved in this little subgroup, I can make sure you get the link and join. Russ?
I want to too, but man, I am spread so thin.
I know.
I am spread so thin, but I'd like to at least learn.
I'd like to.
Well,
September 24th, I'm sorry, excuse me, Jennifer. September 24th.
Yeah, were we able just to listen in on the Zoom and then just for
So it's Zoom.
FYI?
Good.
Laura? Or does that make it a commit,
Well, we don't wanna have a quorum.
I know, that's why we have to be
So-
careful, guys.
So it's like if you're interested in working on this moving forward down the road, definitely attend. And I'm gonna, invite the people that have reached out to me from general public that are interested.
Good.
And
Did you say
also
yes?
with our
Yeah, so there's
cohort in Hellertown Borough, because they're interested in the same thing, so
That's reasonable.
we'll
you-
all
if you
get our
could get
information
a
together.
link for 2 weeks from now, I would like to participate in that.
Okay.
Yes. I'm sorry, I can't hear.
The Allentown EAC, we had online about 2 weeks ago.
Okay, do you want to comment on that? Yeah. Yeah, Chad wants to comment on, we met with that, Lauren House from Allentown EAC convened that meeting a couple of weeks ago, so Chad wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going into any detail about plastic bags.
I don't want to cut over you.
No,
Are you
but
done?
I'm not going into any detail about it. Like I
Okay.
said, it's really, it should be work for a subgroup,
Right.
on the side, because it's gonna take time and a lot of
Yeah.
research and discussions, et cetera.
Are you gonna report any of your, discussions to the general group?
Yeah, we can come back with a summary, whenever we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, and I think it's just a point of subgroup updates. And maybe that's what we get with what you're doing, Alan, a summary,
Yeah.
quick summary.
I think we're okay to establish a subgroup to do research on something and then come back and to collaborate with others. That's fact-finding and research. I think we're fine.
Okay. Allentown EAC visited us a few months ago. Their intern was here, Lauren, and we were invited to be involved with a discussion group that they had at Northampton Community College a week or two ago. Basically, what they're looking for is an information warehouse portal, a communication portal, or a blog, a forum, or some sort of platform to host all of the regional environmental committees, to have a chat board, messaging board, to put up ordinances and other information, to share events that are going on, like a calendar. So it was a fact-finding conversation to figure out what everybody's scope would be in the requirements of the software tool. They presented 3 different options. A couple of them are free with some limited functionality. Some require some monthly maintenance. We Conserve PA was brought up at one point as well. We Conserve, it's something, I don't want to get the numbers totally wrong, but in the ballpark of a few $100s, or like something like a percentage of your budget goes towards your membership to be a part of We Conserve PA. But when they do this, they can set up a sub-site on their website that allows you to have a bulletin board where you can post information to as well. So they sent out, Allentown sent out a survey and summary of notes. I can distribute that email that I got to the group. Okay, I'll make sure that
Yeah.
everybody gets that.
Yeah.
So go through, it'll have the summary of what the meeting notes were, and then, again, if there's any suggestions on the technology or the platform on how we would move forward
I
with
hope
this.
I hope it gets momentum.
Well,
It's a great idea.
Yeah, you put these again, like we've had here and in other events, you put people who are motivated in the room together and stuff gets done.
Right,
Right?
right.
And so there was good energy in the discussion. Lots of people were involved. I would say there was probably, between the online and what I saw in the room, was probably about 30 or 3 dozen people were there.
Right.
I would say. So
Several of us participated, and that was good to
there
see.
was a few of us. You were there, right?
I was there
Yeah.
after I got the right link.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So,
But
I
it's,
threw out my
it's
ideas
exciting.
As much as I can. I asked some questions. I do IT and website development myself, so I'm kind of proficient with some of these tools and platforms they were using, and I tried to give them some advice on which ways to go and what, but we'll see where they go.
Yeah, that was my takeoff from the meeting, was that I had no experience with any of those platforms, and it sounded to me like it was gonna be a real learning curve for me to learn how to use those platforms.
They're more user.
I know that I'm an old guy, and
So am I.
everybody else has probably used these things at work.
No, they're not as cumbersome as you might think. They're more user-friendly than they used to be.
But ultimately, it would be a question of each environmental committee in the area electing a representative who would be the person who has access to this system and to post things to it. as well,
Oh,
so.
a representative, okay.
So I think it wasn't just gonna be open, they
Oh.
have to have limited, you know, and you pay per user for some of these things. But it's interesting, you know, for
It's a great
information sharing,
idea.
for all of us to be in this area, Lehigh Valley, to be more open and increase dialogue.
More power,
We'll see
more
where it
power
goes.
numbers
I'm
too.
gonna make a note to send that email out.
Please.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, that brings us to reliving August 13th. The review of the minutes from August 13th.
Oh, no.
So what I did is I did this, I followed the same procedure I did last time. I went through the minutes and sent Carol a page of corrections or suggested changes to things that I spoke to. And so
I think that's great.
we can move forward with the minutes. Normally, what we've always done in the past is everybody would, well, hopefully everybody would read through the minutes and take notes and then make suggestions to Carol. What has happened this year is we have been more active as a committee, therefore our minutes have turned into hours. And so trying to find an efficient way to go through the minutes effectively, again, I suggest that the minutes now are presented a little bit easier to work with by attributing statements to individuals. So I think the most efficient way to do this now and going forward is if everyone takes it upon themselves to look at what they said, and then we collectively can look at the aspect of minutes that may involve people that aren't here, such as when we have a visitor or something like that, and then we can rely on our collective memories to try to make sure things are recorded accurately. So as I said, I went through all of my comments and Carol has them. And so with that, I open the floor to anybody making comments, or I know Alan, at the last meeting, you turned in written comments. So however we can proceed effectively, if you've done that again, that's great. But I open the floor to corrections or changes.
Yeah, that's what I did again. I'll give these to Carol.
Okay.
Unless you want to hear them, there's 8 pages. Not interested? All right, I'll just give them to Carol.
I was being facetious when I said we were going to relive.
I read the minutes and I have no comment.
Same.
Same.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we will accept the minutes as corrected by Alan's written comments, my written comments, and anybody else who had suggestions for Carol. Is that good? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that brings us to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Before we adjourn,
Can we
so
do it?
just make sure, I will
Since
be
we're voting.
putting this on the next council agenda to request funding
Say that again?
for, I will put this on the
Yes.
next council agenda to request funding for the EAC conference, and
Thank you.
we're not sure how many people, but it's not too many, so if it's
At this point, it's 2.
2, and, you know.
It's
we
probably
can
best to just suggest 2 at this moment, because then
Well,
that's a smaller.
better to ask for more money that
Yes,
you,
yes.
and then you
So you're
don't
gonna
use
keep
it.
I need
Yeah.
to talk to you for 10
So
seconds.
actually, the meeting before, whenever, we had requested money to do a postcard mailing, well, we never did that, so,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Like, they did make a big fuss about it, but we never
A
did
big
it.
fuss.
Because of the timing. It was really hard for us to try to put together a postcard to do for the recyclings that were all coming up real quick,
Yeah.
so.
All right.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Jack.
yes, I think we've agreed to have you put that on the agenda. That's, everyone's nodding in the affirmative.
Clear.
So. Okay, so that motion to adjourn from Chad, do we have a
I
second?
would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.